Bill O'Reilly here, Monday, June 1st, 2020. You are listening to the O'Reilly Update. Here's what's happening today in America. Anti-police riots erupt across the country. Clashes outside the White House injure 50 Secret Service agents. NYPD officers attacked with Molotov cocktails. Some media actually justifying the violence. On the pandemic front, Sweden's death rate 10 times higher than its neighbor Norway. Also ahead, the truth about the riots and social justice. But first, as you know, violent protests hurting dozens of cities across the USA, targeting police officers, looting businesses following the death in Minneapolis of George Floyd a week ago at the hands of police. More than 4,000 people have now been detained in 30 cities since the demonstrations began Thursday night. 15 states and Washington, D.C. have mobilized the National Guard to restore calm. Chaos outside the White House, where rioters set fires near the presidential residence. At least 50 members of the Secret Service were injured by bottles and rocks. President Trump was briefly taken to an emergency bunker after reports of a possible car bomb. 3 suspects, including a member of the Brooklyn Community Board, now in federal custody after tossing Molotov cocktails at police. 4 officers were inside a van when the devices failed to ignite. If convicted, each rioter faces 20 years in prison, and if they are guilty, I hope they get the 20. Media coverage of the protests was at times irresponsible, with some commentators on CNN and MSNBC actually condoning the violence, which has led to death and destruction, dishonoring the memory of George Floyd. On the pandemic front, Sweden's virus death rate now 10 times higher than their neighbors in Norway. That's because lawmakers in Stockholm refused to shut down the economy to combat COVID. 4,400 people have perished in that nation of 10 million since February. On the home front, virus deaths in New York City hit the lowest level since early March. In a moment, the real reason social justice and violent riots are in play. Right back. Bill O'Reilly here with a big announcement. I am back on television. Please join me weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern for the No Spin News on The First TV. 2020 will go down as one of the most important years in American history. Our leaders are struggling, the media totally out of control. Pundits parade from channel to channel with nothing but speculation and BS. Now more than ever, you need facts, not spin. Change the channel on the fake news. Please join me, Bill O'Reilly, over at The First TV. The First is a new kind of network with fresh ideas and bold opinions, and it's available for free on your computer, smart TV, even on your phone. At The First, you can watch me, Bill O'Reilly, and the No Spin News, and so much more. Please go to thefirsttv.com. No cost, no trials, no spin. That's thefirsttv.com. Time now for the O'Reilly Update message of the day, the race violence currently enveloping the nation. If you were looking for insight or intelligent analysis of the brutal Minneapolis police killing and its aftermath, television news has disappointed once again. Most of the commentators are scared of saying something wrong and fail to provide desperately needed perspective. With lightning speed, the unnecessary death of George Floyd quickly became an opportunity for exploitation. Looters and anarchists stole and destroyed, creating even more human misery. Hour after hour, day after day, Americans learned little about the reasons behind a vitally important story. What readers and viewers did get was reinforcement of their own beliefs, as fallacious as many of them are. So let's get down to it. beginning with the police. At present, there are approximately 800,000 law enforcement officers on the job in the USA. Most, obviously, are good, honest civil servants, but perhaps 10% are not. I use that number because human nature dictates about 10% of any organization is corrupt. Always been that way. That's the reason almost all police agencies have internal affairs squads that investigate misbehavior or incompetence. Some African Americans believe a much higher number of law enforcement people are corrupt and actively target blacks. That feeling, often based on negative personal encounters they themselves have had with the police or other white authority figures. There is no debating personal experience. We are all shaped by it. The essential problem between police officers of all skin colors, not just white, and African Americans is crime. Blacks commit felonies and misdemeanors at a higher proportional rate than any other group. That means law enforcement confrontation is much greater, especially for black young males. Also, African Americans are the victims of crime far more than other groups, and most of the time, justice is not achieved. Therefore, there is bitterness in many African American communities over the criminal justice situation. The empty slogans and virtue signaling about race are almost painful to endure. Yes, there are emotionally disturbed bigots who diminish minorities. They will always exist. However, the vile embrace of prejudice is largely shunned in the American public square. But that doesn't stop idiot commentators from depicting the USA as a hateful cauldron of bias. There is, in reality, only one solution, and that is to teach the children well. But that's absolutely not happening in this country. Many schools are simply holding stations with little discipline and standards of achievement. If a child cannot read, write cursive, do math, speak properly, that child will probably grow up to be an impoverished adult without much hope. Therefore, Americans fed up with injustice should focus on the only solution that provides a measure of protection against it: good education. I'm Bill O'Reilly, and I approve that message by writing it. In a moment, something you might not know. Edward and his wife, Margaret, were looking forward to retirement. Edward started having serious health issues a few years before he turned 65 and had to take an unplanned early retirement. The loss of income and medical bills meant Edward could not afford his expenses, including the premiums on a $1 million life insurance policy. Faced with lapsing their policy for nothing, Edward and Margaret turned to Coventry Direct and were able to sell the policy for $130,000. If you own a life insurance or term policy that you don't need or can't afford, Coventry Direct can help you receive an average of 4 times more cash than you'd get from your life insurance carrier. You can even sell a portion of your existing policy and still maintain coverage with no future premium obligations. See if you qualify. Please call 1-800-888-3791 or visit CoventryHelpsSeniors.com. That's 1-800-888-3791 or visit CoventryHelpsSeniors.com. Now, the O'Reilly Update brings you something you might not know. All 50 states now easing social distancing guidelines for nearly 330 million Americans. Even New York City will allow some businesses to open beginning June 8th, a week from today, including construction, manufacturing, and retail. Despite the guidelines, new polling shows not everyone is eager to reemerge from the national shutdown. According to the Associated Press, just 38% say they feel comfortable attending a religious service within the next few weeks. 2/3 refuse to travel at all. The public mostly split on restaurants and bars. 43% are ready to hit the saloons. 55% say, no, not going. We'll continue to eat at home. Very bad news for Hollywood. Just a quarter of Americans plan to visit movie theaters after they reopen. Most studios have shelved big blockbusters until Christmas. The film industry raked in $5 billion at the box office last summer. So this is the biggest disaster ever for Hollywood. Professional athletes preparing for pay cuts. Just 19% of Americans are ready to visit stadiums and arenas. Leagues now working with players and unions to renegotiate contracts, many based on ticket sales. While folks may be squeamish about heading to the ballpark, 3 out of 4 plan on visiting friends and family as soon as possible. Researchers at the Centers for Disease Control say 1/3 of Americans now display symptoms of clinical depression due to the quarantine. So maybe a little socializing will help out. I hope so. What businesses are Americans looking forward to the most? The barbershop. 54% of adults rank getting a haircut at the top of the list after the pandemic. And here's something else you might not know. If you think the virus will end when scientists create a vaccine, you may be wrong. 20% of Americans say they will refuse to get a vaccine. Another 31% admit they're still not sure about it. Back after this. 2 guys, Kyle and Josh, were both losing their hair, which was no surprise to either, since they knew male pattern baldness ran in their families. The way they dealt with their hair loss, however, couldn't have been more different. Kyle put it off, losing more and more hair. Josh went right to Keeps.com to learn how to keep his hair. Keeps offers generic versions of the only 2 FDA-approved hair loss products out there. The genetic versions saved Josh a lot of money, and the consultation was simple. He answered a few questions online and snapped a few pictures of his hair. A doctor then evaluated everything and recommended the right FDA-approved hair loss treatment for Josh. It was shipped discreetly to his door. Keeps lets you save your hair without ever leaving your home. Please go to Keeps, KEEPS.com/Bill to get your first order of Keeps hair loss treatment 50% off. Half off. That's Keeps.com/Bill, Keeps.com/Bill. Thank you for listening to the O'Reilly Update. I am Bill O'Reilly. No spin, just facts, and always looking out for you.